Hello everyone, welcome to day 11 of our Seeds activism project. I'm Juliet and my job today is to talk a little bit about decriminalisation and legalisation of drugs. Obviously this is a huge topic, so it is going to be a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully I can give a good overview of what's going on and help clear up the picture a little bit for you. So, as I'm sure you all know, there are several substances which are currently illegal to supply, possess or produce in the UK under two key pieces of legislation. So the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act and more recently the 2006 Psychoactive Substances Act. Now, for quite some time, drug policy researchers have been looking at alternatives to the current stance of prohibition that we have in the UK. One of these alternatives would be to legalise these substances and have a regulated and controlled market, much in the same way that we have currently with products such as tobacco and alcohol. And I think it's really important at this point to just take note of the fact that what distinguishes these substances that are currently illegal from ones that are not currently illegal, including tobacco, alcohol, even coffee, is precisely that, their legal status. And it's also important to understand that the relative risk of harm from these different substances is actually not reflected in their classification. If they were, we would probably see a greater legal stance on tobacco, alcohol, even unhealthy foods, and other activities that could be considered dangerous to an individual, extreme sports, etc. So the term decriminalisation is a little bit more ambiguous and is not formally defined. It can mean slightly different things across different contexts. But in general, you can see it as a sort of halfway house between full legalisation and full prohibition, which we have at the moment. And in practice, what it can often mean is that for minor drug possession offences, criminal sanctions are removed. But sometimes they are replaced with civil and administrative sanctions, so things like fines, or sometimes people might have a request for treatment assessment or be referred to rehabilitation services. Now, the decriminalisation, legalisation debate is a little bit more complicated than shall we just legalise or not. Policymakers would need to think about what degree of reform is implemented, how would this change levels of substance use, etc., etc. But we can broadly divide the debate into three main areas. So the first sort of concept looks at the rights of the individual versus the duty of the state. And a lot of people would argue that the state does have a duty to protect an individual even from themselves. We witness that in seatbelt laws, in laws about motorcycle helmets, and basically there's this idea that the state should be looking at the greatest good for the greatest number of people, even if this is at the expense of personal liberty. However, if you think about an individual's right to privacy under the European Court of Human Rights Act, then a lot of people would argue that personal drug use should be allowed so long as it doesn't cause harm to others. We already allow a lot of activities that do constitute more direct harm to other people than substance use does. And we also know that most drug use is unproblematic and doesn't even cause harm to the individual, let alone to other people. Now, if there was the potential for harm to be caused to another person or another group of people, then the state could rightfully act upon this risk of harm, but not upon the drug use per se. So the second principle looks at the harm caused by drug policy itself, and this is a huge topic, but essentially what we've seen because of the criminalisation of certain substances is a pattern of mass incarceration. Even people who don't end up going to prison for a long time find themselves with a criminal record, and this can make it much harder to get a job, to be eligible for housing support, all sorts of different things, and just generally more difficult for people to be integrated into society. So what we have at the minute is a situation where the market is controlled almost entirely by organised crime groups, and we have seen an increase in violent incidents relating to possession of certain substances, meaning that the danger that somebody could place themselves in when they're seeking out substances for personal use is really quite significant. It also means that what people are buying is not always what they think they're buying. So some substances are of poor quality, have other substances mixed in with them that people don't know about, and all of these things can increase the risk of an adverse event when using a substance. If we were to legalise or at least decriminalise the market, we could take back power away from these organised groups and ensure that what people are using are safe substances. There are some concerns that if we were to legalise or to at least decriminalise the drug market, we would see a sudden huge increase in the rates of people using certain substances, problematic use and addiction would increase, health systems would be overwhelmed. However, the evidence from other countries suggests that actually availability being greater does not actually increase use, neither does it increase rates of addiction. The reality is that what constitutes a dangerous drug is actually a reflection of societal values, and this has changed across eras. It varies drastically across cultures. And we also know that several substances that are currently illegal have legitimate medical uses, and people should not be criminalised for seeking out a substance which actually has a positive impact on their health and well-being. There are a lot of organisations in the UK who are lobbying really hard for at least decriminalisation, if not legalisation, of drugs in the UK. And we need the government to listen to us and stop blocking calls for changes in UK drug policy, because it is costing people's lives. We want people to be able to use certain substances without being criminalised, without being marginalised, and for people who are experiencing more problematic substance use, for them to feel like it's safe for them to come forward and ask for help without the fear of being punished. So thank you for listening. I hope the video has been helpful. I will put some links to different websites and resources which you can have a look at if you want to learn a little bit more about current UK drug policy or what's been done to decriminalise or legalise substances in other countries across the world.
Intersectionality, there's our doctor and good enemy. Feminism and private policies fighting. Conform for who, conform for where?